She sacrificed everything for him, her career, her identity, her power. She gave all of it up because she loved him. And the first thing she saw when she finally opened her eyes to the truth was him in another woman's arms.
She gave up everything for him, her name, her power, her empire. She walked away from a billion-dollar company, changed her identity, and became just his wife. And what did he give her in return? He gave her mornings where he smelled like another woman's perfume. He gave her nights where his phone was always face down on the nightstand. He gave her a husband who was physically present, but emotionally somewhere else entirely. And on the day she finally asked, "Do you love me?" he looked her in the eyes and said, "Liora, let's not do this right now. I have a meeting." A meeting. She had sacrificed her throne for a man who couldn't even spare her 5 minutes. But here is what he didn't know. Here is what nobody knew. Liora Voss wasn't just a quiet, stay-at-home wife. Liora Voss was the shadow CEO. The anonymous founder behind the most powerful investment firm in the country. And the day she walked out of his house was the day she walked back into her kingdom. Stay with me, because this story, it is about to get very, very good. Before we dive in, if you are new here, welcome to Mind Loom Folktale, where we tell stories that will keep you up at night. Hit that like button right now and subscribe, so you never miss a story like this one. Okay, let's go back to the beginning. In this story, you are going to watch a woman fold herself small to fit inside a man's life. You are going to watch her cook his meals, attend his boring company dinners, smile at his colleagues, and pretend she didn't see the signs. You are going to watch her talk herself out of her own instincts, over and over again, because she loved him, and loving someone means giving them the benefit of the doubt. Until you can't anymore. You are going to watch the betrayal happen, slowly, then all at once, and then, oh then, you are going to watch her rise, not quietly, not gently, like a storm that had been waiting patiently out at sea. There is a husband who will regret every single choice he made, a secretary who thought she was invisible, an old love who comes back too late, and a new man, calm, brilliant, and absolutely devoted, who sees Liora for exactly who she is. This is the story of Liora Voss. The woman they underestimated, the empire they forgot was hers. Let's begin. The story. Liora Voss was 26 years old the first time she appeared on the cover of Capital Quarterly magazine. She wasn't named. She never was. The headline read, "The Mystery Architect, Who is Really Behind Voss Capital?" And Liora, sitting in her corner office on the 34th floor of a glass tower in the city, had laughed softly to herself, turned the magazine face down, and gone back to her quarterly reports. She liked it that way. The invisibility, the power behind the curtain. Her mentor, a fierce, brilliant woman named Madame Celestine Dre, had taught her that. The loudest person in the room, Madame Dre used to say, is almost never the most dangerous one. Liora had taken that lesson and built an empire with it. By the time she was 28, Voss Capital managed over $4 billion in assets. She had offices in 6 cities, 43 people who reported directly to her, all of whom knew her only by her alias, Director V. Nobody outside her inner circle knew her real name. Nobody knew her face. She wore her anonymity like armor, like a superpower. Her days started at 5 in the morning, and rarely ended before midnight. She ate lunch at her desk. She took calls on weekends. She missed birthdays and dinners and social events without guilt, because the work was everything. She was not lonely. She told herself she was not lonely. She had Soren, her deputy, her right hand, her most trusted person. She had Madame Dre, who called every Sunday and talked for exactly 45 minutes about everything and nothing. She had her plant, a stubborn little succulent she had named Gerald, who sat on her windowsill and somehow survived her irregular watering schedule. She had her work, and then she met Kalen Morrow, and everything shifted. She met him at a gala she had only attended because Madame Dre had practically pushed her out the door. "You work too much, Liora. Go, breathe. Remember, you are a human being and not just a spreadsheet." Liora had worn a dark green dress she had bought 2 years ago and never worn. She had arrived exactly on time, because she was always on time, accepted a glass of champagne she didn't particularly want, and was already mentally calculating how long she needed to stay before she could leave without being rude. 45 minutes, she decided. Then she could go home. Kalen was standing near the window when she first saw him. He wasn't doing anything remarkable, just standing there, holding a drink, looking out at the city below, with a quiet, unhurried expression. Like a man who was perfectly comfortable, existing, without performing. She noticed him the way you notice something that doesn't quite fit the pattern. He was tall, dark-haired, broad-shouldered without being imposing. He had the kind of face that looked like it had been lived in, not perfectly symmetrical, not trying to be anything it wasn't. She looked away. And then she looked back. He caught her looking. He didn't smirk or look away quickly the way some men do when they catch a woman's eye. He just smiled, a small, genuine smile, and raised his glass slightly in her direction. She raised hers back, mostly out of reflex. 20 minutes later they were talking. His name was Kalen Morrow. He was an architect. He designed buildings. Real, physical things you could walk into, stand inside, touch the walls of. And there was something about that Liora found deeply fascinating. She spent her days building things you couldn't touch. Numbers, portfolios, futures. He built things that stood in the skyline long after everyone who made them was gone. She found that remarkable. He didn't ask what she did. Not immediately. He asked what she thought about the building they were standing in. An old converted warehouse that had been turned into an event space. All exposed brick and original steel beams and carefully placed modern lighting. It's a conversation, she said, looking around, between what it was and what it became. You can see both at once. He looked at her for a moment. Most people just say it's nice, he said. She smiled. Most people aren't paying attention. They talked for 3 hours. She forgot about the 45 minutes. He didn't ask what she did for a living until they were putting on their coats to leave. And when she gave her usual vague answer, investments, mostly, nothing very interesting, he just nodded and didn't push. He seemed genuinely uninterested in impressing her, or being impressed. She found that extraordinary. He asked if he could call her. She said yes before she had finished deciding to. They dated for 8 months, and those 8 months were some of the best of Liora's life. Kalen was attentive in the way that people who are genuinely interested in you are attentive. Not performatively, not strategically, just present. He remembered things she mentioned in passing, that she hated cilantro, that she loved old jazz, specifically Miles Davis, specifically the album Kind of Blue, that she couldn't sleep unless the window was cracked open just slightly, even in winter, that she had a complicated relationship with her mother that she didn't like to talk about, but sometimes did, late at night, in the dark. He didn't try to fix the things she told him. He just listened. He brought her coffee exactly the way she liked it. 1 sugar, splash of oat milk, never too hot, without being asked, after only 2 visits to her apartment. He made her laugh, in that dry, understated way she loved. Jokes that came out of nowhere, delivered completely deadpan, that took her a second to catch, and then she couldn't stop. He felt like home. And Liora, who had never really had a home that felt safe, had grown up in a house where love was conditional, and approval was earned, and nothing was ever quite enough, fell completely, devastatingly in love with him. She didn't tell him about Voss Capital. Not because she didn't trust him, or at least, that was what she told herself. She told herself it was because it was complicated to explain, because the anonymity was important to the business, because there was never quite the right moment. She told herself a lot of things. The truth, the thing she didn't examine too closely, was that she was afraid. Afraid that if he knew she was Director V, he would look at her differently, that the power would get in the way of the simple, uncomplicated way he saw her, as just a person, just Liora. Not impressive or intimidating or untouchable. Just a woman who loved old jazz and couldn't sleep without a cracked window, and was quietly in love with him. She wanted to keep that. Just for a while longer. When Kalen proposed, he did it simply. No reservation at an expensive restaurant. No friends hidden around a corner with cameras. No performance of it at all. Just the 2 of them on his apartment rooftop. On a Sunday evening in October, the city lights beginning to come on below them, a small velvet box in his hand. I don't have a big speech, he said. I just know that every day I spend with you is better than the one before it, and I don't want to spend days without you anymore. He paused. I don't know everything about you yet, but I want to spend my life figuring you out. Will you let me? She looked at him for a long moment. The city hummed below them. Somewhere a siren wailed and faded. The wind moved her hair across her face and she pushed it back. And she said yes. She meant it completely, with every part of herself. And then she made the decision that would change everything. She would step back from Voss Capital. She went to Madame Dre's office the following week and sat across the desk from her mentor and said it plainly. She was getting married, and she wanted to be present for it. Truly present. Not running a $4 billion company from a secret portal while pretending to be a housewife. She would hand day-to-day operations to Soren. She would remain the silent owner, the invisible hand guiding the big decisions. But she would step out of the daily work. She would be Liora Morrow. Madame Dre listened to all of it without interrupting. Then she said, "And does he know who you are?" Liora was quiet for a moment. "Not yet," she said. "I'll tell him. After the wedding. When we're settled." Madame Dre looked at her for a long time. "Liora," she said carefully, "you are about to build a life with a man who does not know the most important thing about you." "He knows the important things," Liora said. "He knows me. He knows the version of you that you have allowed him to see." Liora didn't have an answer for that. Madame Dre sighed. "Keep your empire," she said finally. "Whatever you decide about the rest, keep your empire. Just in case." "Just in case of what?" Liora asked. Madame Dre just looked at her. She didn't answer. Liora smiled and said she would. She promised. She didn't tell Kaylan. She kept telling herself she would. She kept waiting for the right moment. The first month of marriage. Then the first anniversary. Then she stopped picking dates, because every time she got close to saying it, something stopped her. A fear she couldn't quite name. A voice that said, "Not yet. Not yet. Wait until you're sure he won't look at you differently." And slowly, without meaning to, the secret became part of the architecture of their life. A load-bearing wall she was afraid to touch. The first year of their marriage was beautiful. Their apartment was warm and full of life. Liora cooked. She was a surprisingly good cook, something that had startled Kaylan at first. She had learned from necessity, eating alone in apartments in 4 different cities, and she had gotten good at it the way she got good at everything, through focused, deliberate practice. They argued about the rug. He wanted navy, she wanted gray. They ended up with gray, with a navy trim, and both pretended to be more annoyed about it than they were. They had Sunday mornings that stretched long and lazy, coffee and newspapers, and no particular reason to be anywhere. She attended his firm's events, dinners and launches and client celebrations, and stood by his side and smiled at people, and answered questions about herself with pleasant vagueness. "What do you do?" "I'm between things at the moment, taking some time." People nodded and moved on. Nobody pushed. Kaylan never pushed either. She sometimes wondered if he should have. His career was growing fast. Morrow and Associates had landed a major contract to design a new cultural center in the city. A prestigious, high-profile project that put Kaylan's firm on the map in a new way. He was busy, celebrated, in demand. Liora was proud of him, genuinely, completely proud. She still checked in with Soren every week. 30-minute calls always on Tuesday mornings when Kaylan was at the office. Voss Capital was thriving. Soren was steady and brilliant, and the company moved forward without her daily presence. But she felt the distance from it, like a phantom limb, a constant, low-level ache. She told herself it was worth it. She told herself she was happy, and she was. Mostly. The first crack appeared so quietly that she almost missed it entirely. It was a Tuesday in October, their 2nd year of marriage. Liora was in the kitchen when Kaylan came home from work, loosening his tie, and said as he opened the fridge, "Renata sorted out the Henderson file today. Took her 20 minutes. I've had that thing sitting on my desk for 2 weeks." "Renata," Liora said. "New assistant. Started 3 weeks ago." He pulled out a bottle of water and closed the fridge. "She's incredibly efficient. Honestly, one of the best hires we've made." "That's great," Liora said, and she meant it. She genuinely meant it. She went back to stirring the pasta and thought nothing more about it. That was the first time she heard the name Renata Solis. It would not be the last. Over the following weeks, Renata came up in conversation more and more. Always casually, always in passing. Mentioned the way you mention someone who is simply part of your daily landscape. Renata had reorganized the entire filing system. Renata had caught an error in the Henderson contract that would have cost them significantly. Renata had suggested a new project management software that the whole team was now using. Renata had remembered that one of their major clients preferred calls in the afternoon and had rescheduled accordingly. Renata. Liora noticed. She noticed the way she noticed everything. Quietly, without making it a thing. And she told herself it was nothing. Because it probably was nothing. People talk about competent colleagues. Kaylan was enthusiastic about his work, and the people in it. That had always been true. She was reading into it because she had too much time on her hands. Because she wasn't working, and her analytical mind was turning inward and finding patterns where there weren't any. She told herself this firmly and went back to her life. The first time she saw Renata was at a firm event in November. Morrow and Associates was celebrating the completion of a major project. A rooftop drinks event at one of the buildings Kaylan had designed. Liora wore a navy dress and stood by her husband's side and smiled at people she mostly recognized from other events like this one. And then Carlton said, "Oh, there's Renata." Come meet her. Liora turned. Renata Solis was not what she had expected. She was in her late 20s. Maybe 27 or 28. Sleek dark hair cut just below her jaw. Sharp, intelligent eyes. A smile that was warm on the surface and precise underneath. The smile of someone who had learned exactly how to deploy charm. She was beautiful, in a composed, controlled way. Like someone who had worked hard at presenting themselves and succeeded. Renata, Kaelin said warmly. This is my wife, Liora. Liora. Renata extended her hand. Her grip was firm. I've heard so much about you. All good things, I hope, Liora said pleasantly. Of course. Renata smiled. Kaelin talks about you all the time. It was the right thing to say. Perfectly calibrated. And yet something in Liora's chest did a small, strange thing that she couldn't name. A flicker. Gone almost before it arrived. She smiled back. It's great to finally put a face to the name. Kaelin says you've transformed the office. Oh, I just like things organized, Renata said with a modest little laugh. It makes everything easier. They talked for 4 minutes. Perfectly pleasant. Completely unremarkable. And Liora went home that night and told herself she was imagining things. December came. The cultural center project went into its final phase and Kaelin started working later. 8 o'clock. 9, sometimes 10. Liora ate dinner alone most nights. She told herself this was normal. Projects had crunch periods. She knew that. She had lived through enough crunch periods of her own to know that this was just work, just the nature of it. She started taking on more from Soren. Quietly. More calls, more reading, more of the work she had stepped back from. She told herself it was just to keep her mind busy. She didn't examine that too closely. One evening in December, Kaelin came home at 9:30, smelling faintly of something she couldn't identify. Not alcohol, something sweeter. She noticed and said nothing, because she didn't know what to say, and she wasn't sure she hadn't imagined it. January. She went to his office one afternoon to surprise him. She had been near that part of the city for a meeting with Soren, held in a coffee shop 3 blocks away, and on impulse, she decided to stop in. She took the elevator to the 4th floor, where Morrow and Associates occupied a bright open-plan space. The receptionist recognized her and waved her through. Kaelin's office was a glass-walled room at the back. She could see him through the glass before she reached it. He was sitting at his desk, but he was not alone. Renata was perched on the edge of the chair across from him, leaning forward slightly, saying something, and Kaelan was laughing. It was a real laugh, the kind that involved his whole face. Liora paused for just a moment. She recognized that laugh. It was the laugh she had fallen in love with, the one she hadn't heard at home in a while. Then Kaelan looked up and saw her through the glass, and the laugh softened into a smile. Liora. He was on his feet, opening the office door. Hey, I didn't know you were coming by. I was nearby, she said. Thought I'd say hello. She looked at Renata. Hi. Hi. Renata stood, smoothing her jacket. If she was uncomfortable, she didn't show it for a single second. Sorry to steal him. We were just going over the Henderson presentation. Of course, Liora said. Don't let me interrupt. No, we were just finishing up, Kaelin said. Do you want to grab dinner? I can leave in. I'm actually fine, Liora said. I just wanted to see you for a second. I'll let you get back to it. She kissed him on the cheek. She smiled at Renata. She left. In the elevator going down, she stared at her own reflection in the steel doors. The laugh. She was being ridiculous. He had laughed at something his assistant said. That was not a thing. That was Tuesday. That was normal. She pushed the thought down firmly and went home. February. Kaelin's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter while he was in the shower. Liora was standing nearby making tea, and she glanced at it automatically the way you glance at a screen when it lights up. The notification showed a name and the first few words of a message. Renata. Running through the client notes again. You were completely right about the screen went dark. Liora set down her mug. She stood there for a moment, looking at the dark screen. Then she picked up her mug again. Finished making her tea. Told herself that people text their colleagues. That is what colleagues do. This was a work message. It was 8:30 on a Wednesday evening, which was late, but crunch periods were real and she knew that, and she was being paranoid. She went to bed before Kaelan came out of the shower and pretended to be asleep when he came in. She lay in the dark and listened to him get into bed and felt the familiar shape of him beside her and thought, this is my husband. I trust him. She said it like a fact. She said it like saying it enough times would make the thing in her chest go quiet. March. There was a work dinner, a client celebration at a restaurant downtown. Kaelan mentioned it on a Monday, said it was a team thing. Partners and senior staff, spouses sometimes came, but it wasn't mandatory. Was she coming? She said she would think about it. She decided to go. She arrived at the restaurant at 7:30. Kylan was already there. He had gone directly from the office, and she spotted him across the room at a table of 8 or 9 people she recognized from other events. She started toward him, and then she stopped, because Renata was seated next to Kylan, and as Liora watched, Renata leaned across and said something close to his ear, close enough that her hair almost touched his shoulder, and Kylan smiled and shook his head slightly. The way you do when someone says something that delights you just a little. It lasted 3 seconds. Liora resumed walking. She sat down at the table, and Kylan kissed her cheek and introduced her to the people she didn't know, and the evening was perfectly normal and perfectly pleasant. And Renata was warm and professional, and addressed Liora directly several times and said nothing that could be called inappropriate. And yet, on the way home in the car, Liora sat in the passenger seat and looked out the window at the city passing and felt a cold, slow thing moving through her chest that she still didn't have a name for. "Good evening," Kylan said. "Lovely," she said. "Your team is great." "They really are," he said. And then, a moment later, "Renata's been such an asset, the clients love her." Liora nodded. She said nothing. At home, alone in the bathroom, she looked at herself in the mirror and said quietly, "You are imagining things." She almost believed it. April. She found the receipt. She had picked up Kylan's jacket from the chair in the bedroom, where he always threw it. She was taking things to the dry cleaner, and had gathered up a few of his things without thinking. The receipt fell out of the inside pocket. La Maison Dorée, 2 covers. A Saturday 3 weeks ago. The Saturday Kylan had said he was at a site inspection for a potential new project outside the city. He had left at 9 in the morning and come home at 7 in the evening, and said the site was promising. And they had grabbed a late lunch on the way back. La Maison Dorée was not on the way back from anywhere. It was in the city center. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, and Liora had mentioned it once, exactly once, 18 months ago, passing a review of it in a magazine, and said she had always wanted to try it. Kylan had said they should go sometime. He had not taken her. Liora stood in the hallway for a very long time, the jacket in one hand, the receipt in the other. She was good at processing information. She had built a career on it. Her mind laid out what she knew, with the same clinical precision she brought to everything. The late nights, the phone always face down, the laugh she hadn't heard at home, the 3 seconds in the restaurant, the text notification, the receipt for 2 at a place she had always wanted to go. On a day he said he was somewhere else. She stood with it, all laid out in front of her, and felt something inside her go very, very still. She folded the receipt carefully, put it in her own pocket, hung up the jacket, and finished gathering the things for the dry cleaner. She didn't say anything that night, or the next day, or the day after that. She needed to be sure. She was not someone who acted on instinct alone. She needed data. She called Soren. "I need you to run something for me," she said quietly. "Off the books, Morrow and Associates. Specifically, I need to know about expense account activity in the last year. Credit cards registered to the firm. Anything unusual." Soren had worked with Liora for 6 years. He knew better than to ask questions. He called back in 4 hours. "There's a card," he said carefully. "Personal entertainment account. The spending pattern doesn't match business entertainment." "What does it match?" she asked. A pause. "Dinners, hotels, weekend stays, flowers. A piece of jewelry purchased in February." Liora closed her eyes. February. Around Valentine's Day. Kylan had given her a card and said they would do dinner soon. They had just been so busy. "Thank you, Soren," she said. Liora. "Thank you," she said again quietly. "That." She hung up. She sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She thought about every moment she had talked herself out of her own instincts. Every time she had said she was being paranoid. Every time she had looked at the evidence and chosen the innocent explanation, because choosing the innocent explanation meant she didn't have to feel this. This thing she was feeling now, which was not what she had expected. And she had always assumed that if she ever had to face something like this, she would cry. She would fall apart. She would feel the floor go out from under her. But what she actually felt was something colder than that. Something that sat very quietly in the center of her chest and looked around at everything and said, "I see." She opened her laptop, logged into the Director V Secure portal, and she started working. Not because the work needed her, not tonight, not urgently, but because she needed to remember who she was before Kylan Morrow. She needed to feel the ground. She worked until 2 in the morning. Then she closed the laptop and went to bed. Kylan was already asleep. She lay beside him in the dark and thought, "I gave up everything for you. I made myself smaller for you. I turned away from the most important work of my life. because I thought you were worth it. And you were sitting across from her in a restaurant I always wanted to visit. She lay there and felt it all move through her like weather. And when it had passed, she was left with something clear and cold and certain. She waited 2 more days. She wanted to be composed when she did this. She did not want to do it in anger, because anger was messy, and she needed to be precise. She confronted him on a Thursday evening. She had made dinner, a chicken dish, with lemon and herbs he had said once was the best thing he had ever eaten. She had set the table properly. She had poured 2 glasses of water, and when he sat down across from her and said, "Smells amazing," she said, "I know about Renata." The room went completely silent. Kaelan went very still. She watched his face. She watched everything move across it. Surprise, calculation, the flicker of something that might have been the beginning of denial. And then something that settled into something heavier. He set down his fork. He didn't say anything for a moment, and then he exhaled, long and slow, like a man releasing something he had been holding for a very long time. "Liora," he said, "I'm sorry. I didn't." "How long?" she said. He looked at his hands. 6 months, he said. "Maybe a little more." 6 months. She did the math automatically. 6 months ago was October. October was when she had first heard Renata's name. She had noticed from the very beginning, and she had talked herself out of it every single time. "I didn't plan for it to happen," he said. "I know," she said. "That's what people say. You don't understand." His voice was low, pained. "You've been somewhere else, Liora, for a long time. I felt like I was living with someone who was, I don't know, only halfway here. Like part of you was always in another room." She looked at him. "I gave up my career for you," she said quietly. "I changed my entire life. I was here every single day. I cooked your dinners and went to your work events, and made myself smaller in every room we walked into, together so you could be the impressive one. I was here, Kaelan. Every single day. I was here." He flinched. "I know," he said. "I know. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to blame you. I'm just trying to explain." "You don't need to explain," she said. "I understand perfectly." She put her fork down. "I want a divorce," she said. He looked up sharply. "Liora, I'm not asking," she said. "I'm telling you. Can we please talk about this? Can we try?" "Kaelan." Her voice was steady, completely steady. "Some things can be repaired. This isn't one of them. Not for me." She stood up, pushed her chair in neatly, walked to the bedroom. She closed the door softly, and then she sat on the edge of the bed and finally let herself feel it. The full weight of it, all at once. The grief of it. Not just the betrayal, but the loss of the thing she had believed in. The marriage she had built her whole quiet life around. The man she had thought was her person. She had loved him completely, and he had taken that love and decided at some point that it wasn't quite enough. She allowed herself to feel it for exactly 1 hour. She set a timer. She knew herself. She needed to feel it, truly feel it, not push it down. But she also needed to know when to stop, when to put it aside and become functional again. When the timer went off, she wiped her face, straightened her back, picked up her phone and called her lawyer. The next morning she moved into the spare room. Kaelan tried to talk to her every day for 2 weeks. She listened to him when he came to her. She was never cruel. She was never cold, exactly. She was just resolved in a way that she could see frightened him, because he could tell she meant it. The second time he came to her, sitting on the edge of the spare room bed, hands clasped, eyes red, he said, "I still love you." She looked at him. "I know," she said, and she believed it. She believed that in his way, whatever it was worth, he did. But love isn't the only thing that matters. You have to actually choose the person you love. Every day. "You stopped choosing me a long time ago." He didn't have an answer for that. The divorce was filed 6 weeks later. Kaelan did not fight it. She moved into a furnished apartment near the city center on a Tuesday in June. She did it efficiently. She had always been good at logistics. A moving company for the furniture she was taking. A storage unit for the things she wasn't sure about. By 5 o'clock, she was standing in an empty apartment with a view of the skyline she had always loved, and a bag of groceries, and Gerald the plant, who she had wrapped carefully in tissue paper for the journey. She put Gerald on the windowsill. She made coffee. She cracked the window open, and then she called Soren. "I'm coming back," she said. A brief pause. "And then, I'll have your office ready by morning." She sat on the floor of her new apartment with her coffee, and looked at the city lights coming on in the darkening sky and thought, okay, this is where we are. This is the ground. Now we build. The return of Director V did not announce itself. It didn't need to. Within her first week back at Voss Capital, the energy in the building shifted. Soren said nothing directly. He was too professional for that, but she could see it in the way her team moved and spoke. There was a sharpening, a recalibration. like an orchestra that had been playing slightly out of tune, suddenly finding the right pitch again. She was harder than she had been before. Not cruel, she had never been cruel, but harder, sharper, less patient with softness in the wrong places. She had stepped back from her own life for 3 years out of love and loyalty, and she had received betrayal in return, and that was a lesson she had written into herself permanently. She worked. She worked the way she had, before she ever met Kaelin Morrow, with the focused, relentless, slightly terrifying dedication of someone who had something to prove. Not to him, not to anyone in particular. To herself maybe, to the version of herself who had talked herself out of her own instincts for 6 months, and decided to believe the innocent explanation every single time. Never again. Within 3 months, Voss Capital made its most aggressive acquisition in company history. A struggling tech infrastructure firm that the market had written off. Overextended, mismanaged, hemorrhaging talent. Liora had been watching it for over a year before she stepped back from the company. She had seen what nobody else saw. That the underlying architecture was sound. That the leadership was the problem, not the product. That with restructuring it could be transformed. She bought it for less than it was worth. She restructured it in 6 months. 8 months after acquisition, its value had tripled. The financial press went wild. Voss Capital's mystery leader strikes again. Director, V, the invisible genius, reshaping the market. Who is running Voss Capital? And why won't they show their face? Liora read the headlines, with her morning coffee, and smiled. She was 31 years old. She was sharper than she had ever been. And she was done being small. But her empire was only half of what she was building. Madame Celestine Drey had passed away the previous year. A fact that still moved through Liora at unexpected moments. A grief that didn't announce itself, just appeared quietly in the middle of ordinary things. She had been Liora's compass for so long, her North Star. The woman who had looked at a 22-year-old with too many ideas and not enough backing and said, "I see you. I believe in what you're building. Let me help." In her will, Madame Drey had left the entirety of her estate to Liora. The accompanying letters said, "Because you are the most worthy person I know, and because you will do extraordinary things with it. Don't waste it on sadness, darling. Go build something." Liora built something. She established the Drey Foundation, a mentorship and funding program for young women in finance and entrepreneurship. No barriers to entry. No requirement to already know the right people or come from the right background. Just capability and drive and hunger. The things Liora had had at 22. In its first year, the Drey Foundation funded 47 women. In its second year, 212. She poured herself into it alongside Voss Capital, alongside the work, alongside the slow and steady process of rebuilding herself into something that felt whole again. She was healing. It didn't look like healing from the outside. From the outside, it looked like conquest. But that was how Liora healed, by building, by moving forward, by becoming more than she had been before. And then, at a conference she almost didn't attend, she met Alexei Varn. She had been invited to speak on a panel about long-term investment strategy. She had almost declined. Her calendar was full, and she was tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. But Soren had gently pointed out that the conference was well attended, and the visibility would be valuable, and she trusted Soren's judgment. She was sitting in the front row waiting for the morning keynote when he walked onto the stage. Alexei Varn, founder of Varn Systems, renewable energy infrastructure. She knew the company. She had considered it as an acquisition target 18 months ago, before deciding the timing wasn't right. She had not expected him to be interesting. He was. He talked about long-term thinking in a way that was so precise and so deeply considered that she found herself leaning slightly forward without meaning to. Not about quarterly returns or growth projections or the performance metrics that most people at these conferences were obsessed with. He talked about what you were actually building, whether it would last, whether it would matter when the people who built it were gone. She recognized something in him. A certain quality of attention, a refusal to be impressed by things that didn't deserve it. She put down her phone and listened. Afterward, she made her way to the stage. "Liora Voss," she said, extending her hand. He turned. He was taller than she had expected. Dark hair going slightly gray at the temples. Eyes that were direct without being aggressive. Alexei Varn. He shook her hand. His grip was warm and unhurried. "Are you here as an investor or an observer?" "Both usually," she said. "I never walk into a room as just one thing." He smiled, a real smile, slow and genuine. "Neither do I." They had dinner that evening, 4 of them initially. A small group that gradually dispersed as the evening went on. until it was just the two of them at the end of the table. The restaurant quieting around them, talking about things that had nothing to do with the conference, risk and patience, the psychology of long-term thinking, a book they had both recently read about how institutions fail, not through dramatic collapse, but through the slow accumulation of small decisions made for the wrong reasons. It was the best conversation Liora had had in years. She flew home the next morning and found herself thinking about him, not with the breathless, consuming feeling she had had with Kalen in the beginning, that intoxicating sense of falling. This was something different. Quieter, like a frequency she recognized, a signal that felt familiar in a way she didn't quite have words for yet. He called 2 days later. "I want to take you to dinner," he said. "Properly." She smiled. "Properly? Yes, reservation. Real restaurant, no agenda." "I'll probably talk about work," she warned him. "I know," he said. "So will I. We can be tedious together." She laughed, really laughed, surprised by it. All right, they were not tedious. He was patient in the way that genuinely secure people are patient. Not because he was suppressing something or performing calm, but because he was actually comfortable. With silence, with ambiguity, with her. He asked questions and waited for the full answer. He remembered things she said in passing the way Kalen once had, but where Kalen's attentiveness had been warm and slightly eager, Alexi's was steadier. More like something load-bearing, like a wall that would hold regardless of what you leaned against it. She took her time. She was in no rush. She had learned things about rushing. 3 months in, on a quiet evening at her apartment. Gerald flourishing in his corner, takeout containers on the coffee table, both of them reading in companionable silence. She looked across at him and said, "There's something I need to tell you." He put down his book and she told him everything. Voss Capital, Director V, the $4 billion, and the 6 cities and the 43 people, and the identity she had worn like armor for years. The marriage she had stepped up back from all of it for, the secret she had kept because she was afraid of what it would change. She told him all of it. He listened without interrupting, without his expression shifting in any way that made her feel like she needed to manage him. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "That explains so much about how you think." She blinked. "That's it?" she said. "What were you expecting?" "I don't know," she said honestly. "Something more." He looked at her steadily. "Liora, you built something extraordinary. That's not a complication, that's just who you are." A pause. "Why did you think it would be a problem?" She thought about how to answer that. "Because it was before," she said finally. He nodded slowly. He didn't ask her to explain further. He seemed to understand what she meant. Or at least, he understood that she had said what she needed to say. He picked up his book. She picked up hers. And she sat there in the quiet of her apartment thinking, oh, this is what it's supposed to feel like. She fell in love with him so quietly, she almost didn't notice it happening. Almost. It was around this time, several months into her relationship with Alexei, a year and a half after the divorce, that Liora attended the Dre Foundation's annual gala. It was a significant evening. The foundation was announcing its third-year funding recipients, and Liora had worked closely with the selection committee. She wore a deep burgundy dress that she had bought the previous week without overthinking it. She arrived on time. She shook hands and gave a brief speech, and spent the evening moving through the room the way she had always moved through rooms. With a quiet authority that she no longer tried to hide. Alexei was not there. She had not invited him. Not yet. She was still being careful about what she brought him into. But Zara was there. Zara Ife had been Liora's closest friend since university, sharp and funny, and completely loyal, one of the few people who had known about Voss Capital from the very beginning. She had watched Liora build it, and watched her step back from it, and watched her pick herself back up afterward. Zara had opinions about all of it. She generally kept them to herself until Liora asked. At one point in the evening, Alexei arrived after all. He had a contact at one of the foundation's partner organizations, and had been invited separately, he explained, looking slightly sheepish. Liora introduced them. Later in the evening, while Liora was across the room in conversation, Zara found herself standing next to Alexei near the bar. She looked at her friend across the crowded room. Liora in her burgundy dress, composed and radiant and completely in her element, a glass of champagne held loosely in one hand, and said quietly, "She sacrificed everything for him, you know. Her career, her identity, her power. She gave all of it up because she loved him. And the first thing she saw when she finally opened her eyes to the truth was him in another woman's arms." Alexei was quiet for a moment. He looked at Liora across the room, at the way she held herself, at the way people gravitated toward her without her seeming to try. at the steadiness of her. She deserved better, he said quietly. She always did, Zara said. She just didn't know it yet. Alexei said nothing else for a moment. Then he said, she knows it now. Zara looked at him properly, the way she looked at people when she was deciding something about them. Then she nodded. Yes, she said. She does. That same evening, Dorian Ashev arrived. Liora saw him before he saw her. Dorian. They had dated briefly, intensely, in her early 20s. He had been a law student then. Brilliant and driven and electric, in a way that had been thrilling at 22. She had been building the first version of Voss Capital, running on ambition and black coffee, working 20-hour days and weekends, with a single-mindedness that left very little room for anything else. Dorian had loved her. She had loved him in the way you love people at 22. Completely and somewhat recklessly. But they had wanted different things from each other. He had wanted her to slow down, to be present, to choose them over the work, and she had not been able to do that. Not then, not for him, not without losing the thing she was building, which felt as necessary to her as breathing. They had ended it mutually and with genuine sadness. She had thought of him occasionally over the years, with fondness, with no regret. He was a successful attorney now, corporate law, high profile. He had aged well. He looked comfortable in his own skin, in a way she didn't remember from their 20s. When his eyes found her across the room, they stopped. He made his way over. Liora Voss, he said. Or should I say Director V? You can say Liora, she said. It's still my name, he smiled. You look well. So do you? She meant it. How long has it been? 8 years, he said. Give or take. They talked for a while. It was easy. The way things are easy, with people who knew you before you became whoever you eventually became. There was a shorthand to it, a shared history, that meant you didn't have to explain everything from the beginning. And then he said, with a directness she had always liked about him, I never stopped thinking I made a mistake. She looked at him steadily. Letting me go? Not fighting harder to stay. She was quiet for a moment. Dorian, she said carefully, you didn't make a mistake. We wanted different things. You wanted me to slow down. I couldn't slow down. Not then. Maybe not ever. That's not a mistake. That's just incompatibility. Maybe things are different now, he said. She smiled, genuinely, not unkindly. I'm with someone, she said. He looked at her. Read her face. He had always been good at reading her face. Something about their history meant he still could. He saw that she was telling the truth. Not just that she was with someone, that she was happy. Something moved across his expression. Not quite resignation. Something more like acceptance. Like a door being quietly closed from the inside. He's lucky, he said. We're both lucky, she said. That's how it's supposed to work. He raised his glass. To you, Liora. You always were extraordinary. She raised hers back. I know, she said simply. And they both laughed. Some months later, Kalen Morrow found out. He found out the way the rest of the world found out. Through the financial press, which had finally gotten hold of a photograph of Liora at the Dre Foundation Gala, and run it alongside a story about Voss Capital's extraordinary year. A colleague dropped the magazine on his desk one afternoon and said, You seen this? They finally got a photo of Director V. Kalen, looked down, and there was Liora, his Liora, standing at a podium in a room full of people, a banner behind her reading Dry Station, Annual Gala, composed and radiant and completely, entirely in her power. The caption, Liora Voss, founder of Voss Capital and Director V, announces second-year funding recipients. He sat in his office for a very long time. His ex-wife was Director V, the anonymous architect behind one of the most powerful investment firms in the country. The person the entire financial industry had been trying to identify for years. She had been that person the whole time they were married. She had given it up. She had stepped back from a $4 billion company and made herself small and cooked his dinners and attended his work events and said, I'm between things to strangers at parties. For him. And he had sat across from Renata Solis in a restaurant his wife had always wanted to visit and put his card down for the bill. The shame of it was physical. It moved through him like something tectonic. Slow and enormous and irreversible, he called her. She picked up on the third ring. Kylan, not cold, not warm. Just his name in the voice he still knew. Liora. I saw the article. I thought you might. You were Director V the whole time we were married. Yes. A silence. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. She was quiet for a moment. I was going to, she said honestly. I kept meaning to. I kept waiting for the right moment, and then the right moment kept not coming. And then, after a while, I think I was just afraid that it would change things. It wouldn't have, he said. She was gentle but precise. You don't know that. He didn't have an answer for that. I didn't know what I had, he said. Liora, I had no idea. No, she agreed quietly. You didn't. Can we, Kaylin? Her voice was kind, settled. What we had was real. I loved you completely. I don't regret that, but it's over. And I need you to hear this. I'm okay. I'm genuinely okay. A silence. Are you happy? He asked. Yes, she said. I am. He was quiet for a moment. Good, he said finally. I'm glad, Liora. I really am. They hung up. She set down her phone and looked at Gerald the plant, who had grown considerably in the months since she had brought him to this apartment, as if he too had been thriving. And she thought, clean. That felt clean. The decision to go public happened quietly. She was at Alexi's house on a Sunday morning. They had started spending weekends there, a low-key ritual she had come to love. He was reading in the armchair. She was at the kitchen table with her coffee, watching a bird attempt to assess his very unfortunate rosebush through the window. I want to reveal myself, she said. He looked up, publicly. As Director V, my name and face on everything. Interviews, press, all of it. I want to stop being anonymous. He put down his book. What changed? She thought about it honestly. Nothing changed, she said. I think I just finally feel like the same person everywhere I go. I don't need the protection of the anonymity anymore. I'm not afraid of being seen. He looked at her with that steady, unhurried attention that she had come to trust completely. Then do it, he said simply. Just like that. Just like that. He picked up his book. I reserve the right to be obnoxiously proud of you at the press conference. You're not invited to the press conference. I'll watch from my phone and send you excessive messages. Deal, she said. The press conference was on a Thursday morning. Voss Capital's PR team had arranged it precisely. Journalists from every significant financial and business publication were present. The room buzzed with the particular energy of people who believed they were about to witness something historic. Liora walked out in a deep burgundy blazer. Her color now, she had decided. Hair down, calm as still water. She stepped up to the podium and looked at the room. Good morning, she said. My name is Liora Voss. I am the founder and chief executive of Voss Capital. For the past several years, you have known me as Director V. I chose anonymity because I believed my work should speak before my name did. She paused. I believe it has. She looked out at the room. And so, here I am. The room erupted. She answered questions for 50 minutes. Precise, confident, occasionally dry in a way that surprised people and made them write it down. She announced the Dre Foundation's third-year expansions. 500 women funded this cycle, 3 times the previous year. She announced Voss Capital's new renewable energy investment division. She did not mention Alexei, but she knew he was watching on his phone. She walked out of that press conference into the bright morning sunlight and stood on the steps. For a moment, her face turned up slightly toward the sky. Her phone buzzed. Alexei. First of 17 texts. That was extraordinary. She smiled. Then she went back to work. Kaylin Morrow and Renata Solis lasted 7 more months after the divorce was finalized. The relationship that had seemed so urgent in its secrecy, so necessary, so charged, turned out to be significantly less interesting once it existed in ordinary daylight. Without the hiding, without the contrast, without Liora as the background against which it happened. They ended it without drama. Kaylin worked. He became, by most accounts, a better architect and a more present colleague in the years that followed. He was quieter than he used to be, more careful. He never remarried. He sent Liora a text the morning after the press conference. It said, I saw you, I'm so proud of you. I lost the right to say that. I'm saying it anyway. She replied, thank you, Kaylin. Take care of yourself. She meant it warmly and completely. She had made her peace. Renata Solis left Morrow and Associates 18 months later. She started her own interior design firm. She was, by all accounts, very good at it. Life moved forward for everyone. Dorian Ashev remained in Liora's life, the right distance, a warm presence. He sent flowers when the foundation hit 1,000 funded women. She sent a good bottle of wine when he made partner. Some people are meant to be a chapter. Dorian understood that now. Soren Hale was promoted to president of Voss Capital. He cried when she told him. He denied crying. There were 4 witnesses. Alexei proposed on a Tuesday evening in Liora's apartment. No reservation, no audience, no performance of it. Just the 2 of them. And Gerald the plant, who had grown so substantially that he now occupied an entire corner of the living room, and had acquired 2 smaller companion plants that Liora had named Gerald 2 and Gerald 3, which Alexei pretended to find excessive, and she pretended to believe he meant it. He got down on one knee. He said, I don't have a speech prepared. You know I'm not good at speeches. He looked up at her. I just know that I want to keep doing this. Every version of this. The work mornings, and the quiet Sundays, and the conversations that go too long, and the ones where we don't say anything at all. Every version of you. The one who runs a company, and the one who talks to her plants, and the one who occasionally cries at nature documentaries and tries to pretend she doesn't. She opened her mouth. I know, he said. You don't cry. You have something in your eye, every time. He smiled. Will you let me keep being the person who knows that? Liora looked at him for a long moment. The city hummed outside. Gerald I occupied his corner with his usual dignified authority. And she said yes. She meant it with everything she had. And this time, there was nothing hidden. No secret room in the architecture of them. No part of herself she was keeping back out of fear. She was completely, entirely herself. And it was more than enough. So let's come back to where we started. A woman standing at the entrance of a restaurant, holding a gift bag, smiling, about to see something that would change everything. She could have shattered. Most people do. But Liora Voss did what she had always done. She looked at the data. She made the decision. She closed the chapter. And then she built something no one could ever take from her again. Not the empire. She had always had that, herself. The lesson isn't that you shouldn't love people. The lesson isn't that ambition is more important than love. The lesson is simpler than that and harder than that. All at once. The right person doesn't ask you to become less in order to love them. The right person sees all of you, all of it, the empire and the plant and the jazz and the cracked window, and says, yes, all of that. I want all of that. Liora found that. In her own time. On her own terms. And she arrived at the end of her story more whole, more powerful, and more loved than she had ever been. Not because someone saved her. Because she saved herself first, and then let someone worthy walk into what she had built. And that, my friends, is the story of Liora Voss, the woman who hid her empire, lost her love, and came back more powerful than anyone saw coming. If this story moved you, hit that like button right now. It truly helps this channel more than you know. If you are not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe and tap the bell so you never miss a story on Mindloom Folktale. Drop in the comments, who was your favorite character? Were you Team Alexei from the beginning? Did Kalon deserve a second chance? And did you see the Renata signs coming before Liora did? I want to read every single comment. Stay close, because next time, we have the story of a woman who spent 10 years building her husband's company from nothing. Handling the finances, the clients, the strategy, the late nights, all of it. Her name was on nothing. His name was on everything. And on the day the company went public, she discovered he had quietly, carefully, deliberately removed every trace of her from the record. What she did next. You will not see it coming. See you in the next one.